With me today is Detective Stephanie Linkus, Linkus, also with the Denver Police Traffic Investigations Unit. Also Officer Keith Spooner, Spooner. He's one of our highway traffic enforcement officers. So today we are here to provide an update to the public and the press in regards to the large number of vehicles involved in the what turned out to be a fatal injury crash occurred on March 1st of this year at approximately 10:40 Saturday morning. There's been several requests for the finished accident report. It is not ready, and because I don't have a timeline for its release, opted to provide this press conference in an attempt to update the public and the press. So I'll have a few remarks, share some information, and then take questions. The collision was called into the 911 at approximately 10:38, I believe is the first call that we received. Officers arriving on the or first dispatch at 10:42. So this was just before 11 o'clock Saturday morning. When they arrived on scene and started to see the large number of vehicles, and in addition to that, we had at least one fatal injury involved, they then called our office. Traffic Investigations Unit is responsible for assisting the patrol in taking on those investigations that have serious bodily injury or fatal injury, and this did occur. This collision, even though we've remarked involved about 104 vehicles, is really multiple collisions. This is going to be any number of. We've certainly thrown around the word 50 or the number 50. Could have been as many as 200 collisions. And the reason we say that is, although 104 vehicles were involved, they all didn't collide with each other. 104 vehicles didn't collide with another 103 cars. But there were pockets of collisions that ended up in groups. We did have 3 major groups on that highway. The Traffic Investigations Unit responded to and assisted with the investigation of the most northern group. The second group, which was further back on the highway, and the third group, even further back, closer to University, those were all investigated and handled by the District 3 officers. We took primary consideration for that northern group, which was bounded by Logan and Washington. So behind me are some diagrams that we have prepared that will be part of the final accident report when it's released. Since it's not prepared for release, I wanted to at least provide you with what we call our working copy of the event. This is what's called a post-crash diagram. The 2 views you see behind me are the crash group that I referred to that Traffic Investigations took responsibility for. Groups 2 and 3 are not part of this diagram. So if you're looking for all 104 cars, that's not part of what we investigated, neither is it going to be on this diagram. This is simply that first group. What you'll see behind us also is subject to some change and revision. Keep in mind it's a working copy, but we provided as a way to reference what we had when we got there. We arrived on scene in Traffic Investigations approximately 10:50 to 10:55, so somewhere around 20 minutes into this event we arrived. What we found was numerous vehicles, one person declared deceased on the scene. I think you've already been given her information, and unfortunately I don't have that right in front of me, so I'll have to refer you back to your own reports for her information. We began to take photographs, and we will show you here in a moment 1 or 2 of those photos that we took on scene showing the condition when we arrived. What was remarkable about that is the roadways had already begun to clear. They were substantially clear. They were wet. It's a concrete surface roadway. However, the only ice and snow remaining were on the skip lines. That's those lines that separate each lane of traffic. So it was somewhat puzzling as to why we had such a large event. Investigated it, took our pictures, cleared the scene, and when we came back to the station and we were able to pull up some of the photographs that had been shared by folks on scene who had cameras, iPhones, and then uploaded them to the various media websites and the picture websites, Flickr and Google Pics, we realized that at the time of the collision, just 20 minutes prior to our arrival, the conditions were in fact very icy, very snowy. We had the opportunity to do what we call some friction tests on scene, realizing in speaking to some of the witnesses and the officers who were there that the conditions had in fact changed. I was unable to get what I would call a good friction test of the roadways in the condition that they were in at the time of the collision because I was looking at wet roadways instead of icy roadways. I went over to the Logan Street Bridge where it was still in the shade and we still had some ice on the roadways, and using a drag sled, it's an old-fashioned way of trying to get the friction value, I basically took a weighted piece of metal with a tire tread on it, using a scale, drug it across the ground, and what that does is that tells me what the friction value is of the roadway. I came up with a value of 0.45. For reference, dry pavement in Denver is usually about 0.8. So we had about half of the friction value on the roadway. This is at the time of the test. Looking at the photographs that we took off of your websites later, I believe it was even slicker than that at the time of the collision. Couldn't tell you what because I didn't have the opportunity to measure that. However, in the past, under similar conditions, I've measured as low as a 0.2. So if we're talking 0.2 versus 0.8, that's very significant. That's why it was slick. The case, the facts known to us at that time through witness statements, we gathered what we knew about it, went to the district attorney to find out, is this a case where we are likely to file criminal charges? Our conversation with the district attorney resulted in no criminal charges will be filed for having any accident-causing violations. Again, the reason for that was the rapidly changing conditions that caused the collision to occur. That is, the temperature that day was very cold. It was below freezing air temperature. However, roadways were not snowy and icy all day long. This is a storm that moved through very rapidly, and in fact, as we'll show you the photos in a moment here, it even blew out so fast, roadway conditions changed in the 20 minutes it took me to get there from the scene. So based on the fact that there is a rapidly changing conditions on the roadway due to the weather, and really not one person to say, you are the person who caused this collision, there's no way to pinpoint what really set this chain of events into motion except for a trigger event of some vehicles that lost control in front of our 18-wheeler. As she was attempting to avoid colliding with them, she was unable to move out of the way, did in fact collide with those first three cars, and then what you see on the board behind is a result of simply the cars attempting to avoid each other and not being successful. However, having said that, with 104 vehicles involved, the other consideration is, do we cite 103 people for driving too fast for conditions, load up our courtrooms, city attorney, district attorney, to what end? Would we have a likelihood of juries to convict under those conditions? And our conversations with the district attorney are simply no. We do not believe juries would find persons to be at fault given the conditions of this collision. So taking this event as it occurred, the facts around this event, no charges, no criminal charges will be filed. Now I say that with the caveat that if we have folks who it turns out have driver's license issues or should not have been driving in the first place, we will likely have to address that. So somebody who's driving without a license or driving under suspension, driving without insurance, we may issue citations in those, but to have somebody who's being held responsible for the collision itself, that will not occur. I have Detective Linkus with me. I'd like to have her step up and show the photographs that I referred to earlier. The first photograph that she'll have is a photograph that we obtained off, and I'll have her explain where she obtained these photographs, and so she can explain more fully how it is we came to the decision no charges would be filed. Detective Linkus.
So the first photograph is about 20 minutes before we actually respond on scene, and I actually got this off the media website. I believe it was Channel 9 or 4. Took this off the website showing, I think that's from the Logan Bridge looking down, showing how massive the weather changed and how quickly it changed from being snow and icy. By the time we actually got on scene, this is more what the roadway looked like. So it was pretty much dry, wet, no ice, and kind of helped us determine why 104 cars would collide. When we get there, it's dry. So that just goes into that consideration, that showing that weather was a factor in this accident.
An additional reason for having you out here today is we have been able to identify most of the vehicles involved, put drivers and occupants in those cars, but we are about 5 or 6 vehicles short. So I'll have Detective Linkus make a request for information on those cars.
I've personally talked to approximately 40 of the 45 vehicle owners and the diagram shown behind me. So I'm asking, if I have not personally contacted you or you've not talked to a detective in our traffic investigations unit and you're involved in this accident, to please give us a call at 720-337-1459. 1000, and just let us know where you're at in this vehicle. We will need your vehicle information and also who is driving and any occupants in the driver, as well as whether you have injuries or not resulting from this accident.
That's all we have by way of narrative. Do we have any questions?
Is there any indication that anybody was driving like above the limit, or is this just a case of there's nothing you could really do?
Really, this is in what we refer to as the old T-Rex construction zone. T-Rex, that part of I-25 between University and Broadway, has a higher speed limit, higher than 55. It would not be unusual for folks to be traveling through that area at 60 to 65. To be quite honest with you, I think that's what folks are admitting to doing, is that they were driving the speed limit. As they came into the area, the conditions surprised them. We're certainly not unadjusted to driving in snow and ice in Colorado, and we do reduce our speed. But again, this is one of those flash storms that moved through the area quite rapidly as a result of the dew point, low temperature. It froze the roadways, and it moved through as quick as it moved in, and those roadways, with the heat, I think, from the pavement, eliminated the ice in the short time it took us to get there. So truly, by a technical look at the law, were people driving too fast for conditions? Yes. Yes, they were. However, did those conditions change so rapidly that they didn't have the opportunity to properly assess as a driver that condition requires a change? Perhaps that's what they were doing when the collision started. Once the collision starts, let's say you're traveling 20 miles an hour, less than the speed limit, at a 0.2 friction, that's like driving your car on the avalanche skating rink at the Pepsi Center. You just can't bring that car to a stop, no matter how hard you try. And at a low speed, you'll slide that car for a very long distance. And I think that's what we had here.
What is the speed limit there, by the way?
I want to say 60. Officer Spooner confirms that for me. He works that. So 60 miles an hour in that section.
Were the roads treated at all for these conditions? And if they were, was it adequate?
I don't know about that. CDOT would have to answer that. It's my understanding that they were treated. However, again, it's that flash freeze that came through, built up on top of it, and it could be that treatment that was partly responsible for having changed the conditions so rapidly in the short time it took me to get there. So I don't know for certain, but I am told that the answer is yes.
Any consideration to anything coming down from any overpasses or bridges above and contributing to the icy conditions?
Certainly not that we're aware of or could even prove.
In Colorado, the weather changes pretty quickly all the time. Have you seen this before, those rapidly changing conditions quite this fast?
I do, but normally it's in the summertime. Think about driving down the highway, and all of a sudden we're in a sheet of rain we can hardly, windshield wipers can keep up with, and a half mile down the road we're staring at the sun. So we do see these weather conditions, but typically not in the winter in this condition. It's usually in the summer, and we're better able to deal with it. So, yes.
What about fog? I know a lot of people that we talked to said that the fog kind of set in that lower part of I-25. Is that something that you guys were able to see from pictures, or did that play a factor?
There was a bit of a haze as you examine the pictures, and certainly go back to your own websites and look at those pictures that are posted. There's a haze. Is that part of the low dew point and just, again, the humidity, high humidity? There was a haze there. Was it enough to keep you from being able to see far enough down the road to see what was going on? I'm really unable to answer that question simply because I wasn't there at the time. We haven't had any of our witnesses really speak to that as being an issue. It was simply the slickness of the roadway that caused the issue.
And this isn't the first time weather has gone from one extreme to another, but what is it about this that contributed to it being 104 vehicles? Because if every time the weather changed here that drastically, I mean, this isn't, we don't have this big of a problem.
Indeed. And I'm going to say just the conditions that it laid on the roadway was more ice than snow. When we get snow on the roadways, we don't lose the friction. We lose some of it, but we don't lose it to the point of an ice skating rink. That plays a big part of it. It was so low. The other part is, what was the triggering event? Someone lost control, either spun, struck something. We don't really know, and we don't have the ability right now to pinpoint what that was, but we do know somebody started to lose control in front of the truck. The 18-wheeler, in attempting to avoid that, slides and starts to jackknife. does eventually come to a stop, but has already collided with some vehicles, and now vehicles attempting to avoid the truck and all that are colliding with each other and colliding with the truck. So it was a chain reaction. There was a considerable distance between this group 1 that we're referring to and the second group, and some distance between that group 2 and group 3. So we obviously have cars that did successfully come to a stop, and others that didn't. So it was simply a combination of factors that were rapid. Very often we have warning that snow is coming because we see it, you report it, and so we are leaving our house with those conditions already underway. We leave our house at slow conditions. So we didn't necessarily drive into it. So what were the conditions on I-25 at Hampton versus here at Washington? When I left the office which is right here at this location, going to that, I was in the sunshine. So that storm didn't make it to this specific location as it moved through the town. So it really is such a rapid moving and isolated storm that caused this, that causes the district attorney and us to be hesitant to file charges on any person because, again, juries are going to be hesitant, I think, to convict.
How did some of the drivers that you talked with describe the conditions? I mean, did those that could get out of their cars, did they get out of the car and it was ice? Did they stand on it?
They did. I did speak with a couple different people that told me that they did hit their brakes. They believe they were going about 45 to 40, slowing down, getting to about 25 when they hit the brakes. The more they slid, and then the chain reaction of events just occurred, and everyone just collided with everyone. A couple women that I spoke with did tell me when they got out of the car, it was actually slippery underneath their feet, so they remained in the car until EMS arrived.
Now, we did have one of the persons who ended up striking the 18-wheeler tell us that he was so desperate to bring his truck to a stop, he tried to steer it against the wall and use the wall as a way to bring it to a stop and hit the trailer anyway. It was at a slow speed, but folks were desperate to bring their cars to a stop and just couldn't do it.
Was it about a normal traffic day as far as car volume on there, or was it higher, lower?
I know Officer Spooner was coming into work that time. I'll ask him about the conditions as he was coming into work that day.
That morning, the conditions were icy. There was a freezing drizzle, and traffic volume was normal for a Saturday morning on I-25. And I don't think anyone really suspected the sudden change in the weather conditions.
Estimated timeline for completion, some resolution to this investigation.
As soon as, with your help, we get the remaining information we need to complete the report. So that's why we're having this press conference. I simply don't have one for you. So I don't know when the report will be completed, and so here we are today. But again, we are going to provide the information that we have so far through the PIO's office. So within about a half hour at the conclusion of this press conference, you will have in your hands the vehicles involved that we are represented on our diagram, with registered owners and occupants that we know so far, with their contact information. So it'll be typically the information you get from the face of an accident report in a little different form. We will, on that request, have highlighted the vehicles that we do not yet have occupants for. And so it will be our request to the media that as you report on this, provide that specific information so that folks can see, oh, I think that's my car, and then they can then call us and we can get them properly added to the report. So I don't have a timeline for you, but we are looking for your help in getting that. And we're down to about our last 5 or 6 vehicles, so we are mostly there.
And just to clarify, you're talking about these 3 separate pockets.
We are just referring to this one you see here. District 3 handled the 2 other groups, and so I'm not here to address those today. Thankfully, there were no injuries that required our involvement in either of those crashes. Traffic investigations was limited to this this group here, and that's the one we're referring to today.
How many cars were involved in that specific?
45.
And can you talk a little bit about where are those drivers left then, because there will be no charges filed, no one, I guess, at fault? Do you have any idea where those involved drivers are left as far as recouping and kind of?
Nope, that's going to be one of those issues that they have to take up with their insurance companies. And I suppose the litigation process beyond all our job is to do is investigate the collision to see can criminal charges be supported for a conviction. In this case, it's no, so we will wrap up our investigation and hand it over to those who take that ball and run with it down the road.
Just to be clear, so somebody lost control, and then a semi came, jackknife, and then that kind of started everybody careening into one another.
We were told it was approximately 3 cars. So the 3 cars you see near the semi referenced as 2, 3, and 4, they somehow either slid, lost control. We don't know if they impacted with each other or if the semi impacted, but they were the original ones who lost control, and at some point the semi collided with those 3.
Any other questions?
Have you guys been working with CDOT at all with this investigation?
No. No, they will receive our report in the end. If they have any engineering or any issues that they need to examine, they'll use our reports to make those decisions, but we'll be handing it over to them. We won't necessarily be a part of that.